Welcome back into the Door Report alongside Adam Sparks. He covers Tennessee for the Knoxville News Sentinel in Knoxville. Of course, we all know him from the Vanderbilt circles, covering Vanderbilt for so long. Adam, I really appreciate you taking the time. It feels a little ironic. I don't know if it does for you, but at least for me and a lot of Vanderbilt people, covering Vanderbilt and Tennessee from the Tennessee side of things now. Thanks for checking in.
Yeah, good to be on. Yeah, it's my second year covering Tennessee, and I had a number of these moments the first year where I felt like I should be on the other side of the story or the beat or whatever. It's worn off a little bit now, but now I've been back to Vanderbilt Stadium or First Bank
Yeah,
Stadium.
First Bank Stadium. Yeah.
I've been back there since coming to the Tennessee beat for the Tennessee's practices for the Music City Bowl last year. That felt a little weird. But the good thing is I knew where everything was. I felt like I was, showing people around to a house that I used to live in. But it'll be a little different. It'll be a little different this week to actually sit in the press box and cover a game. I don't think they have the same seat for me. But we'll see.
No.
I may go and sit in it by accident and then have to apologize. Yeah.
Adam, I want to ask you, of course, Vanderbilt fans know you as, covering Vanderbilt for so long. I mean, I feel like you really entrenched yourself into, the Nashville community. How's it been? I mean, kind of, these first couple years, what's it been like covering Tennessee? And we know the differences, we know the differences between Tennessee and Vanderbilt. But before we get into this game Saturday, what have been kind of some of the stark differences from fan base to coaches, players, academics, all type of different things from Vanderbilt and Tennessee?
Some of them people are going to recognize immediately. At Vandy, you obviously always had sort of the tension between university and athletics. That's always been there. Even when I covered Vanderbilt, I would always say that it's not that Vandy is so different from everybody else in that way, the SEC especially. It's that Vandy just follows the older traditional model of college sports from decades ago, where
right.
You would say, well, academics is most important, and athletics is also part of the experience. And that was the norm decades ago. It's just that was abandoned or put aside, a number of years ago to everybody else. So it's not like Vandy did something really different in its approach. It's just it never really changed with the rest, for better or worse. It depends on sort of what you value in that conversation. And at Tennessee, Tennessee looks like all the other SEC schools in that way. Athletics drives things, and there's never a conversation at Tennessee whether or not athletics should take even a half a step back in terms of money or support or funding, anything like that. In terms of the beat, everything is on steroids at Tennessee compared to Vanderbilt. And what I mean is when I covered Vandy, when they would take a tough loss or something, or somebody would, transfer or our coach was fired, whatever, it would be bad. When the same thing happens at Tennessee, it's catastrophic. When a good thing would happen at Vanderbilt, they'd win a big game, they'd get to a bowl game, they'd land a good prospect, whatever. It was really good. At Tennessee, it's a moon landing. So it's just everything is just exaggerated. Everything is on steroids at Tennessee. And one of my maybe misconceptions coming to the beat was I thought my biggest headache would be Vol Twitter. Everybody knows about Vol Twitter, and I would even have some interactions with Vol Twitter when I was in the Vandy beat. I've had no problems with Vol Twitter, and I've said this a number of times on the beat, is that Vol Twitter has not been a problem for me. Vol Facebook is the problem.
Oh, so that's a little bit different, huh?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a generational thing. Vol Twitter is funny and savage in certain ways, but you sort of get the joke.
Yeah.
Or maybe at a certain age you get the joke, and
Facebook gets a little personal.
Yes. Yeah, Vol Twitter is is vicious, but it doesn't take itself seriously.
Right.
Vol Facebook, thinks every story written, every quote taken, every lead in a story is like the Gettysburg Address and should be treated that way.
Well,
So,
at least you had a little bit of familiarity with Tennessee fans, Vol Twitter, maybe not Vol Facebook, as I'm hearing, but you had a little bit of a taste of it before you even got to Knoxville. Adam, I want to get now to the Jeremy Banks situation. This is what everybody is talking about, and this is a perfect example of everything is amplified at Tennessee. Say this happens at Vanderbilt, this may not even be the talking point. This could be Clark. Maybe Clark says something different about it. But Josh Heupel, you asked him. I mean, you asked him directly. The rumors that were going around, and I mean, I guess you could say he deflected it, but the fact that he did points to what actually happened. Do you know what happened? Is there truth here? Where does the truth lie with the Jeremy Banks situation?
I don't know exactly what happened. No. Yeah, this is a good example of it because I mean, some things like this would happen at Vanderbilt. Why isn't this player available? I heard he wasn't at practice. I heard this thing happen. It's just at Vanderbilt when something like this would happen, there would be like, three rumors.
Right.
Is
And
it
there's
is
not
it
as
a
much clamoring, from
yeah,
fans, I guess.
is it A, B, or C? Which one happened? Oh, or D, all the above. At Tennessee, I've heard like 30 rumors. And I love the ones that have like combined with each other that um I got one this week that Hendon Hooker's ACL was partially torn in a fight with Jeremy Banks over NIL,
Oh, man.
and then the defense the defense somehow quit the game or refused to play. But I don't know. I may be combining some of them too. But at Vanderbilt, when something like this would happen, that was we didn't quite know the full story. You'd get like three rumors. At Tennessee, you get like 30 rumors, and that's some of that's Vol Twitter and Vol Facebook and all that, and it just feeds on itself. There's just more people,
Yeah.
and there's more imagination, I would say, and there's more media. I mean, at Vandy, you would have the standard. You would have the Tennessean, who I wrote for, and you would have 24/7. You'd have Rivals, and you would have a few other sites. You would have your coverage. You would have some podcasts out there, but you could sort of count them on two hands.
Right.
At Tennessee, you can count on two hands maybe who's in the room at the press conferences, but then you can count on 50 hands all the secondary, tertiary, whatever media that's out there that who have never met Josh Heupel and wouldn't know Hendon Hooker. I mean, I guess they would know him, but he wouldn't know them.
Right.
And so there's more leeway there to just take a rumor and run with it as if it's a report. I've told Tennessee fans that this week, if you take the 20 rumors that you've heard, take the 10 craziest ones and just put them off the table. That didn't happen. And then of the 10 remaining, take the one in the middle, maybe that sounds the most logical, and that's maybe close to the truth. I think Jeremy Banks had an altercation. We can take that from the fact that I asked Josh Heupel, and he did not deny that there was an altercation. I think Jeremy Banks was suspended because I asked Josh Heupel, and he did not answer that. If you don't suspend a player and then in a public setting you're asked, did you suspend the player? If you didn't suspend him, you say no, he wasn't suspended, and you move on. All that told me was there was an altercation of some kind. He was punished, and that's why he was not at the game. Beyond that, I think the most logical thing is I think there was an altercation. I think Jeremy Banks did not react well to the altercation. I think probably missed a practice, missed a meeting. Instead of kissing and making up, he made it worse than it should have been, and that's why he was punished. I think more of the aftermath. I think it was more of a cumulative thing than it was just one incident. And I also think if Jeremy Banks didn't react in a bad way to whatever the altercation was, I think we probably never would have heard about it because these things happen on teams. But that's why I think he did not play last week. And everything that's happened after that has been grossly exaggerated. The fact that people are blaming Jeremy Banks's absence on that for the loss is, boy, that's going to be quite a stretch. I think morale was down a little bit because there was some tension on the team, and that maybe contributed to the fact that they came out flat in the game. The fact that he didn't play, I don't think makes that much difference. He's their best blitzing linebacker, so that would have helped a little bit. But they got beat because their secondary got torched. And, for the people that tuned into that and say, well, how did Spencer Rattler throw for 400 yards? Well, Bryce Young threw for 400 yards on them. Anthony
Right.
Richardson threw for 400 yards on them. They've had 7 SEC games, and 3 of the 7 quarterbacks have thrown for 400 yards. So this was actually closer to the norm than people would think.
Right.
They lost the game because they got outplayed and they weren't ready to play. Maybe 5% of that goes to Jeremy Banks's absence, but I wouldn't go much further than that.
Adam, you mentioned Hendon Hooker, and I hate it for the guy. I mean, really likable guy, and he was on track to likely, be in New York for the Heisman Trophy and maybe win it. So that really is just awful to see. In terms of his backup, Joe Milton, we've seen a little bit from him. His stats are really off the charts. I mean, he's, the mop-up duty that he has been in, he's played well. So for Tennessee fans, and at least for Vanderbilt fans to kind of figure out what they might get from Milton on Saturday night, how much confidence do you think Tennessee fans should have in Joe Milton Saturday night, maybe leading them to victory?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things that go to the Hendon Hooker injury that could affect this game. I think maybe the biggest one is sort of the hangover effect. I know Vanderbilt fans and those around the SEC kind of understand somewhat about what Hendon Hooker means to this team and the program. But it goes a whole lot deeper to like team leader and all the sort of things. I can make a somewhat of a comparison from my time covering Vandy that imagine if Dansby Swanson tore up his knee late in the 2015 or 2014 season. Yeah, you could plug in a shortstop. Yeah, well, second baseman in 2014.
Right.
Yeah, you could plug in a guy who could affect the team, but there would be more than just replacing the player.
Right.
And there would be a hangover effect from that that would affect results after that. That's the biggest thing. I mean, there were a number of guys crying like during the game and certainly after the game about the fact that Hendon Hooker went down. There could be a hangover effect from that. There certainly was early this week. Players admitted to it. Eventually, you got to turn the page and prepare for Vanderbilt that, looks like a much better team than they were like a month ago. Joe Milton can run the offense fine. Their execution of that offense is just so important with the tempo because most teams, really no teams, are quite 100% ready for it. Joe Milton can throw the ball to the moon. I've never seen in person a quarterback, and I covered a number of NFL games for years. I've never seen a guy in person that can throw the ball like he can. Last year, that was a problem because he overthrew a lot of guys, had no touch on the ball. This year, in mop-up duty, he looks like he's fixed that. He's throwing really good deep balls. But that's mop-up duty. That's, against 2s and 3s late in a blowout. He hasn't, since he was starter early last season, he hasn't done a full 4 quarters, make adjustments, get over bad throws, be in a competitive situation. He just hadn't done that in a year and a half. So I'll be interested to see how he does it, especially if we get rain. His arm is good in weather because he's got a really strong arm, but nobody's great in that type of weather. I also think we can't overlook the fact that this offense is the best in the country statistically, but it never really has to deal with errors by its quarterback.
Right.
I mean, Hendon Hooker threw like 58 touchdowns, and
he never made a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's 58 touchdowns, maybe 4 picks, something like that in almost 2 seasons. There's almost never a time when the offense says, well, our quarterback let us down there. It's always just, you think 100% of the time he's going to make the right decision. And if Joe Milton throws a pick, how's that offense going to react to that? I'll be interested to see. Just as big as maybe Milton, because I think Milton's going to be fine, but there's injuries to receivers that could affect this game. Cedric Tillman has been banged up for a while now. He was not 100% this past game. Brew McCoy was not 100% at the end of the game. I think he was limping off the field. That's two of their three starters. So are those both of those guys available? One of them available? None available? That certainly affects things. And every piece that you take out of that offense of what's worked all season, I think the more mistakes you could have. If Tennessee comes out and is offensively looks like what it has looked like, they're going to beat Vandy, and they're going to beat Vandy by double digits. If they're a little off kilter, I think Vanderbilt's going to smell blood in the water, and then we probably have a game.
Adam, you talked about the irony. Well, we talked about the irony of, you covering Tennessee for this game, but the irony of the similarities between the 2016 game and this year's game are almost it's almost the same situation. Now, 2016 Tennessee probably wasn't as well coached and well, I think, put together as a program, under Butch Jones at that point, but they had a lot of talent, a really good quarterback, good weapons on the outside, maybe not the best defense. Tennessee at this point in the season, 9-2. If they win, maybe they're in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, that's the exact situation they were in 2016. Vanderbilt was able to take them down. Yes, they did have Kyle Shermer and likely a better offense, but does this remind you of that 2016 game and that situation, at least, a little bit?
Yeah, and I think 2016 for Tennessee, if I remember right, they lost to South Carolina also.
Yes.
And that sort of got them a little off track, and then the Vanderbilt game knocked them off the track and from where they thought they could go, which was the Sugar Bowl. I think that Tennessee could still get to the sugar, orange, or cotton technically. I think the way that the CFP rankings lay out, the likelihood is the Cotton Bowl, still maybe the Orange Bowl, but I'm looking at flights at the Cotton Bowl right now, so I think that's the likelihood if they win. But regardless of which bowl it is, yeah, if they win, they're probably in a New Year's Six bowl. If they lose, they're dropping out of that. And Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt wins, they're in a bowl. So, yeah, it reminds me a whole lot of 2016 because there's something on the line for both programs. It's a little different, but there is a carrot at the end of that if you can win the game. In 2016, Tennessee took for granted that game and still had a little bit of a hangover from things that it had lost out on and missed out on. And like the phrase I used before, Vanderbilt had smelled blood in the water in that game. And now that was 2016 was a veteran Vanderbilt team.
Yeah.
That had guys that thought this is where I'm going to make my mark. This is where I'm going to be remembered as leading this team, leading this program, to a height that they hadn't been at in a little while, back to a bowl and respectability. And, I'm trying to think, I remember that year they beat Georgia in Athens.
Yes.
They gave Auburn a great game, and then they beat Tennessee. And so that for the guys that left that team that year, they said, okay, we made our mark, and it all culminated with the win over Tennessee. From afar, I don't see as much of those veteran type guys on this Vanderbilt team. I see more of a Vandy team that's sort of ascending, that probably has their best football ahead of them next year. But they've got a lot of energy to them. If you beat Kentucky and you beat Florida back to back, there's no reason you think you can't beat Tennessee. It just, so much of this, I think, just goes down to morale and the psychological aspect of it. That played a big part in the 2016 game, and I think it will in this one. Vandy, I think, will be ready to play, but more of it, I think, comes down to Tennessee. Are they ready to play? Is there a hangover? How motivated are they? Do they want to bounce back, and are they hungry, or are they still thinking about what happened last week and what could have been? Whichever Tennessee team comes out, I think we'll probably know that in the first quarter, and whichever one that is will probably dictate whether this is a 3-touchdown win by Tennessee or a field goal at the end.
Well, and last week, Adam, was just so surprising. I mean, by all college football fans, I think watching that game, there were a lot of people that did tune in. What South Carolina was able to do was simply take advantage of Tennessee's defense and their secondary. We saw what they were able to do to upset Tennessee. Is that the same recipe for Vanderbilt, do you think? I mean, you saw what happened for Vanderbilt to compete and maybe win this game. Is that what, you think is likely for them to do to pull this off?
Well, I will say that Vandy, it's on paper, either before or after that South Carolina game. On paper, I don't love the matchup for Vandy because I think, I mean, also which quarterback are we going to see for Vanderbilt? But Mike Wright throwing some, running a lot. Tennessee would rather face that than a guy that can throw it really well, like AJ
Yeah.
Swan can. So maybe we see a little Swan. I would think maybe if he's healthy, maybe we see both of those guys. Um, Vanderbilt will like to establish the run. Tennessee's perfectly fine with that. They're pretty good against the run. They're bad against the pass. So if a team wants to run, that they would prefer that. So on paper, I don't love Vandy's matchup in terms of personnel and scheme. And they're going to have some pretty tough decisions because anytime you see your upcoming opponent lose a game they shouldn't have lost, or you see something that could be exposed, you kind of have to decide, do you do what's in your comfort zone, but maybe isn't a great matchup, but you do it well? Or plan B, do you change what you do to then do what maybe hurts the opponent the most? And Clark Lee's going to have to decide that because they can throw it downfield, and if they do, if they stretch the field a lot, I don't think that's necessarily right in Vanderbilt's comfort level, but that's what's worked against Tennessee. South Carolina protected well, and they threw to open receivers who just could not be covered. Can Vandy mimic that? I don't know. Clark Lee probably has to have, and I'm sure he will, a absolute plan of what they're going to do, and not just sort of go in and see what works. Because if you do that, if you do that second one against Tennessee, you may find yourself down 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. And that's the other thing about Tennessee, is that if you take the South Carolina and the Georgia games out of it, the way that Tennessee has beaten teams is that the opponent becomes somebody that they're not, and they do it even before the game starts. Brian Kelly at LSU was going for it on fourth down at midfield, which he would not have done in other games, like 4th and 10 at midfield going for it. Well, why are you doing that? Well, you have to, because Tennessee's going to score 50, so you just have to change who you are. Billy Napier at Florida was doing the same thing. And if you go into a game saying, I'm going to play the opponent's game because I have to, otherwise I'll get blown out, you're already beat. And I would think Clark Lee would know better than to do that.
Yeah, and he talked about that. He said that's simply not the formula, us getting into a shootout with Tennessee. I mean, that's not the formula. It can't be the formula for us. Adam, real quick here before I let you go, kind of a two-part question. What do you think the crowd's going to look like? Obviously, Tennessee fans will have more fans in the building, but to what extent? What extent do you think that will be orange/black and gold in Nashville Saturday night? But also, what's your prediction for Saturday night?
It'll be about a quarter Vanderbilt, 3/4 Tennessee. I think there was some thought that maybe Tennessee there would be fewer Tennessee fans now that they lost the South Carolina game and all that. But I think most Tennessee fans bought their tickets before the South Carolina game. The weather could affect either crowd, I guess. I just think there's a lot of Tennessee fans that are going to be sitting around Thanksgiving dinner or Black Friday shopping or whatever and say, hey, do you want to go to the Vandy game? And they're going to look at tickets on StubHub, and those tickets, the prices are going to be dropping closer to kickoff. And then the ones that said they weren't going to go a few days ago are going to go. So I think it's going to be about 75% UT, 25% Vandy. The hardcore Vandy fans will go, and then they'll get a few extra on top of that. You're not going to have, the Vandy students aren't going to be there because it's a holiday break. So it'll be about 3/4 Tennessee, I would expect. And prediction, I think on our site this week, I picked like 38-24 Tennessee, something like that. I mean, the thing about picking Tennessee games is always weird because you can pick right around the line, and a lot of times they're like a 17-point favorite or something in some of these games, and then they win by 40. And so you never know offensively what you're going to get. I think they will look flawed on offense at times because of because the quarterback change, because of the conditions. So I don't think this is going to be a game where they're putting up 50. I think the defense will be better. I think they'll be somewhat motivated. I think they match up better with Vandy defensively than they certainly did South Carolina. Vandy will score. I don't think Vandy's going to be able to keep pace with Tennessee. So, 38-24, something like that. I think Tennessee wins by a couple touchdowns. But a field goal game in the fourth quarter would not shock me. Tennessee by 30 would not shock me. So I guess I'm kind of picking in between the two.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that, Adam. I'll release mine, of course, in our episode later today. But thank you so much for joining. Good luck with your coverage. Of course, you will be in Nashville. Bring the poncho. It's a shocker. It's supposed to rain at Vanderbilt Stadium, huh?
First Bank Stadium.
All right, First Bank. You got me, Adam.
Yeah, I'm still
Shocker
doing that
to everyone that I got that wrong. But Adam, thanks for taking the time.
All right, good to be on.